I think that was pretty
Hello.
loud. Sorry,
Testing.
hope I didn't hurt anybody's ears.
We can all take our seats, please. Gallery, keep it down.
Okay, today is October 7th, Tuesday, 1 p.m. in the South Annex, and we are here for a TDC, BCC meeting, workshop, and I would like to ask Mr. Kellenberger, our county administrator, if he would lead us in the invocation.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate it. May the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to gather this afternoon to take on the tourism business of the county. Please guide us and watch over us as we have our discussions and make decisions today so that we can make the best decisions for all concerned, for the people that live here and the people that come visit here, and most importantly, the people that work in the industry. As always, help us treat everybody with patience and fairness and kindness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I would like to say that we're going to try to wrap this up by 3:45 if possible, or sooner, because there are several people here that have commitments after this meeting. So with that being said, the meeting is called to order. The Commissioner Anderson will not be here today. The other four commissioners are here. And Matt, if you don't mind, would you come up and give us the opening comments?
Thank you. I just want to take a minute to thank you all for being here today. It's not very often that we get to have the TDC Council and the BCC all together in the same room. So I think this is, great momentum as we navigate strategic planning and we really look to, identify what our priorities are moving forward from a tourism perspective. We've been doing a lot of heavy lifting already. The TDC Council's been doing a lot of heavy lifting as the steering committee, putting a lot of time and effort into this project. So, we're all excited about the outcome of this. With that said, I really want to take the opportunity to turn it over to our consultants from Jones Lang LaSalle. We have Dan Fenton and we have Scott Beck and Brisa Lee.
I forgot about Brisa last time, so I was giving Matt a hard time. I want to start by thanking all of you for the time. We work in a lot of communities, and we very rarely get this kind of access and this support from this level of county engagement. So thank you very much for your time and energy. I think it says a lot about the industry, but I think it says a lot about you guys as well. So thank you very much. It's really impactful. So we thought we had a couple of sort of paths today. One is to give you an overview of the process that we've undertaken. That's going to be pretty quick. So at any time, feel free to stop me. We're going to go through the public survey that we are sort of just wrapped up. And that's going to be, again, an opportunity for us to kind of have some conversations and dialogue. Oh, thank you, Nicole. Not used to having a microphone in my hand.
Would you state your name, please?
I'm sorry, I'm Scott Beck with JLL.
Thank you.
And then we have a couple of open discussions that I think are really going to guide and be the focal point of what we want to accomplish today. And my colleague Dan is going to really lead those open discussions. So I'm going to just kind of start with some of the survey, some of the nuts and bolts of what we've been doing. Do any of you have any questions about the process before we get going?
Not yet.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I'm sure I'll have some.
Okay. So we have what we call the JLL tools. So these are 3 proprietary tools that we use to assess the destination. And that's been really sort of the boots on the ground work that we've been doing with Matt and his team. We did what's called stakeholder engagement, which led to a SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then now we're in the public survey and the public engagement phase. All of those things will eventually lead to some strategic recommendations and guidance and output from the entire team. And I want to say the access that we've had to information, to data, has been stellar. And the work that the teams here are doing on behalf of the industry is really impactful. I'm sure you know that, but it's also, I think, something we don't want to let unsaid. That this is a really, really strategic and very focused and committed organization. So as we look at the tools that we use, the first one is called the Demand Driver Scorecard. And this is really an inventory of those places, if you will, but attractions that create demand for overnight visitation. That's the lens through which all of these tools look, is overnight visitation. And so this is an inventory that we work very closely with Matt and the team to develop, but it's really generated from an experience like a guest has. We have an online process that we go through to research and find and uncover these demand drivers. And basically, just like a visitor or a tourist would as they look at the destination, we then get the context of the local team here and really begin to build the impact of what the current inventory looks like. And this builds basically some categories. And those categories are art and culture, outdoor recreation, other areas where we can then begin to see where these demand drivers are clustered and where there's opportunities to create new opportunities, to evolve some opportunities, and then to see where they really fit within this whole journey of the visitor. That's really a great place to start because it gets us also really familiar with sort of the locals' view on it. It delivers a scorecard. Again, in this ranking, this is all part of what we deliver. You'll see this full, robust demand driver report that we have as part of our plan. But this scorecard, again, has criteria that we establish and work with to create this lens through which we evaluate the landscape and look for opportunities for growth. We then have a process called the event matrix, and this is looking at those events. These are leisure events. These are not like conferences or conventions or sporting events. These are leisure events that, again, create demand for overnight visitation. And I think this goes unsaid, but I don't want it to go unsaid. There's a lot of events in this community. There's a lot of things you all do and support, and we think they are both an important driver of visitation, but it also says a lot about the community, about what types of events, what events you support, and what that ethos is behind that sort of that event culture. So it really helps tie together a lot of the aspects of marketing, positioning, and how you strategically, again, look at how we can increase and enhance overnight visitation and what drives that demand. Events also become a very important part, as does the demand drivers of quality of life, because residents also enjoy the events in many ways, and they are a lot of times driven from a local's perspective that have a very strong tie to visitation. That's where we think the secret sauce is when you can have both of those. There are obviously private events that happen all the time, but again, those are what they are, and we think that when there's that coming together of the quality of the resident experience and the visitor experience, when events get really special and very impactful. Again, like the demand driver scorecard, it has a scoring criteria. And this criteria really is one developed to help us assess and contextualize the individual events. The other thing that we've found very helpful and something that will be part of our strategic recommendation is we make this scoring available to the local community. So as you now build your future strategy based on the recommendations that we make, you can, again, use this criteria to establish and look at the events through a similar lens, which we think creates some continuity in what we're going to create in terms of recommendations and paths moving forward. Much like the demand driver scorecard, we sort of rank these things, and we rank them, and I really want to kind of over-index that this isn't necessarily a qualitative review of the events. It's their ability to drive and enhance visitation, so their ability to drive demand. So because something may be a very local-oriented event, it scores between 1 and 10. That doesn't mean it's a poor event. It just means as it relates to visitation and driving demand, it scores lower than something of a higher rank. The cornerstone of our work that we've been doing is the Tourism Readiness Index. And this is an index that has both a quantitative and a qualitative part of it. And this is where we've really gone deep into the work with Matt and the steering committee on what the competitive set looks like for this organization and how they benchmark and look competitively, because this is a competitive industry. People have a lot of choices in terms of where they go to spend their dollars when they're on vacation. And this index has at its goal the deliverable of a typology. And so these typologies reflect where you are in the continuum of development as a destination, and really then help set the framework for the strategic lens through which we use to sort of make our recommendations. Because there are very different recommendations based on your trajectory within the industry. Someone who is a dawning developer, who's new in the industry that lacks infrastructure, may have more of a need for infrastructure. A market like Walton County, which is fairly mature in its sort of reputation and its product, has a different challenge and different opportunity as it relates to the development of your strategic planning. Anything Mr. Fenton wants to add on the tourism index? Because this is the genesis behind it, the man right there in the corner, okay? So we have 8 pillars that we use to evaluate the destination and look at it through this competitive lens. And while the competitive part is very interactive and very important, this really is not a traditional competitive benchmark. It's not really at its core a tool to look at the competitive set. It's really a tool to look at where you are as your typology, and what that means in terms of your ability to affect the strategy that you're going to implement over the coming months and years. So this is the competitive set that was defined for this work. And I think a lot of this makes really good sense. You know a lot of these places very well, but it is also something that there is some nuance here, because not everything is sort of as black and white as just a name would appear on a piece of paper, but it does really create a sense for where the differentiations are in the markets. For instance, you all know this very clearly, but there is a lot of vacation rental here. Very different than a lot of your competitive set, where they have a higher index of hotels. And that means a lot of things in terms of strategy, in terms of types of visitor. But that doesn't mean that the way the visitor experiences the destination is going to be entirely different. So those are the nuances that come through this competitive set that help us then again address through the typology our recommendations on what strategies we want to recommend and sort of look to and consider for the future. Any questions on the competitive set? It always tends to be somewhat of a discussion. I wanted to give anybody a chance. I know the commissioners haven't seen this before. The steering committee has, and we've had some discussions. Does anybody have any questions there on the competitive set?
Agree with them. I'm very familiar with those. So.
Okay. We, again, spent a lot of time with Matt and his team on developing this, and we thought it would resonate with most of you. One of the most impactful parts of the index is the stakeholder engagement part. And this chart really is to show the scope and scale and the breadth of what we've gone through in terms of our engagement with people here in the community. And while stakeholder engagement can sometimes be formulaic, what we find is when it really kind of hits its stride is when you have some really unique opportunities, which we have had, to really meet with a very diverse group of people, from the art and culture community to safety and security to beach operations to elected officials to anything from hotel communities and hotel groups, vacation rental management companies. There's been a really, really broad spectrum of people that we've had the opportunity to speak to, and that's what gives the real full breadth of what we're talking about from a stakeholder engagement. The other part, which we'll get to in just a minute, is the public portion of it, because the public is clearly a stakeholder here, a very, very important stakeholder. And we're going to get through that survey here in just a minute and going to dig into that, but we're also really excited about the next 2 days and what they're going to bring to us in terms of the public opportunity we have to speak face to face. That again, gives a lot of sort of texture to what we have in terms of the survey. So all of that, again, those are the sort of the overview of the tools that we go through and we use that, again, are part of most all of our opportunities like this. But again, the commitment and the level that we have had in terms of engagement with this community has been really above our expectations. Let's just leave it at that. So as we come through the end of our sort of engagement process, we were asked to develop a SWOT analysis, which again are pretty similar, everyone knows what these 4 quadrants are. I've given you the detailed version of what that looks like, but I'm just going to kind of go to the highlights. So really, I think it goes without saying that the natural beauty of this place is pretty hard to beat. And that has clearly and will, I think, has always been a strength, but it really is. I hope you all recognize how incredibly differentiating it is in terms of the way that this destination has just sort of naturally been given its assets environmentally. It's pretty special. And the way it's been developed and the way it's been brought forward, and even more than that, the way that it's been sustained and preserved has been, again, at the heart of all of your success. I think therein lies the challenges. You have a really, really beautiful, unique place that isn't infinite in its ability to access and infinite in its ability to serve the demands of visitation. And so the idea that you have sometimes overcrowding, congestion, impacts, those are all part of any analysis that would come of a community like this. But I think uniquely, there is an opportunity here that is pretty powerful in terms of the tools, the commitment, the times and resources to address these issues. We see a huge opportunity to look beyond sort of just the traditional visitor. That doesn't mean forget the traditional visitor, but really look at how You look at the trends that are happening in travel, the commitment that these multi-generational families that are such a big part of what happens here, how you can become more relevant to that traveler with the influx of Gen Z and all of the people that are now coming into the decision-making processes. This is a real opportunity because you have such a strong recognition historically of a place to come for the family. So it's not as though you're trying to convince people of something, you're trying to remind them of something, and that's a real opportunity. While a lot of the threats that we identified are ones you don't control, that doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't talk about them, but the threats from climate-caused catastrophes, those are really, really important. We saw economic downturns and what happens there. But we also think that one of the threats is rising competition, that as we come out of COVID and as we become more, again, have more of an opportunity to continue to travel, to do those types of things, competition is always going to be an important aspect of this industry because it is one of choice. And so looking at that, we see that while it is a threat, we don't choose the word threat. It's part of what the SWOT analysis is, but we think it, again, is while it is a threat, it is clearly also an opportunity. And we're also, as part of this undertaking, a look at the reserve policy. And again, the forethought that has gone into creating the current state of a reserve policy and wanting to look and make sure that's relevant, I think can help mitigate some of these threats as well. Any feedback or questions on the threats, SWOTs, the SWOT analysis part of this?
Anyone?
Yes, Brad. Commissioner Drake, excuse me.
Thank you. This is good. This is getting down to, at a very granular level, what we need to be looking at as far as what's working, what we need to be looking at in the future. So if you look at our strengths, the demand is very inelastic. It's not going to change much. We have a quality product, and we're very good at it. The weaknesses, I'm glad you're identifying the challenges with seasonal demand, but do we really have, and I have to look at my counterparts here that live this day in and day out, do we really have a season anymore? I mean, we used to have what was considered the shoulder season, but now you're still seeing a lot of activity in the months of September, October, November. What is it that we're offering that is feeding the tourism economy here in the county? What is it that is working in the off-season? And then what is it that maybe we should be looking at? I mean, we're good at sunshine and sand. Okay, we got that down. So what is it that others are doing? And if you look at, where our competition is, I see in some of the other areas they're investing in sports parks, so they're chasing that sports attraction dollar. Does that fit for us? I mean, if we got into that business, is there room to make enhancements there, something that would be of added value to Walton County tourism? What else? We're not chasing that theme park experience, should we? What is it that we can do to kind of fill those gaps in that off-season, so to speak, while we still kind of, well, in my opinion, I don't know that we have an off-season. Are y'all seeing that?
So let's defer to your colleagues that have initially. So, TDC board, do you have an off-season?
We definitely still have an off-season. I know it feels a lot busier, but you have to understand that there's a lot more available product out there. Really, we see a significant fall off, even that first week of August, because kids are going back to school so much earlier. We're usually very soft until we roll into fall break. Fall break this year has we've got a couple of weeks, really, we're in them, that are really strong demand this week and next. But the other couple of fall break weeks have been better, but you're not sold out. And then always, of course, November, January, and February, or November, December, January, and February. It's just really what you've got is well-placed events that do drive business in. Obviously, Songwriters is January, there's wine festivals in November, but we don't have any consistent demand drivers, if that makes sense.
You want my microphone, Tiffany?
One thing that has been a shift over the years is that we don't have the same snowbirds that we used to have. So we do have, the ADR has stayed, I feel like, pretty strong, where we still have the events that we're dependent on, that people do come in to hit that kind of like the shoulder off season. I do also feel like our summer is more compressed based on the schools going back in our feeder markets, completely different than what they did before. And a couple years ago, South Carolina and North Carolina had the exact same issue. We're just now slowly feeling that with our other feeder markets. So, but I would say that that snowbird has been a significant shift over the last couple years.
What does the snowbird look like nowadays? I mean, I remember when I was.
It's not Canada.
Right. When I was 10, that's who was coming
Yeah.
down here to visit. Who is coming down here and
I'll let y'all
enjoying
talk a
our
little bit more,
amenities
too.
in the winter season?
The snowbird business out on 30A has never been, it's just the price point's not right for that type travel. I think you have some individual owners getting into it, but most management companies on 30A, because of their rates, have not done. Would you think that's fair, Brian? Traditionally, a lot of snowbird business.
Yeah.
I think in the Miramar Beach area, there's more snowbirds,
There are.
and they tend to stay 3, 4, 5 months, sometimes 6 months, and they stay very active. And I don't know what all they have to do, but maybe there's a lady in the audience who might be able to share that with us. Mhm.
They rent from us. But I agree. I don't think that Canada came last year, and they're not coming this year.
Would you state your name, Linda?
Linda Franks, sorry. I live in Miramar Beach, of all things. So it's a big, big difference without the snowbirds. But there is a snowbird organization in Miramar Beach. It's actually Walton County. Is this functional?
That's
Sorry.
better.
In Walton County, and they have like 2,000 members that come in and register, and I don't belong, I don't know what they do, but they must be having fun. I guess they're dancing, going on boats, whatever they do, but they're here for most of like late December, and then through January and February, they start to go home.
Are they primarily, are they finding lodging accommodations in the hotel motel? It's all short-term rental?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay.
and smaller townhomes.
And some of them, in the past, I know, that they would rent the same place year after year after year.
And complexes.
Right.
So you'll see it more segregated to complexes as opposed to, like, we're gonna get a smaller house. Now, I feel like from our long-term side, more owners wanting to rent for 6 months and a day and
Right.
provide for a snowbird at that, than as opposed to you're getting tourism tax dollars.
Is that still a constant customer, the 6-month rental?
We do see that,
You see
yeah.
that?
I just have a couple thoughts here. Do we have a list of outside-the-box opportunities that would maybe diversify our county a little better than instead of concentrating on the south end only? Are we looking at anything? Do we have a list of any of those outside-the-box type events, ideas, or are we just solely concentrating on the south end of the county?
No, it's a very comprehensive countywide, and I think we do. I don't think we have it to present to you today. We're going to go through the public survey, which I think you'll see calls out some of that, what that looks like. And then we have an open discussion planned as part of this to have that very discussion, Commissioner Curry, that yes, we are, if you want to go out of the box, very much looking at those. We're kind of framing them as off-the-beach activities.
Yeah.
I think that's a very, very important part, and
I
it
just-
has
I
been
just feel like
foundational
we're-
strategy.
I just feel like we're kind of in the same zone that we've been in for the last couple of years, using the same tactics year after year, and we're expecting a different result, and what we're getting is mediocre or below average. I just would like to think of some different types of events, something that would draw the diversity up towards the north end of the county. To piggyback on what Commissioner Drake said, with strengths and weaknesses, we're very strong in the south end, but we are very weak in the north end when it comes to events. I mean, you can just look at the TDC dollars. So that was just my 2 cents. I'm writing as I go. It's my first time at one of these, so.
Thank you. Ours too. You know, this. I will say that a lot of those questions tend to be driven from an accommodations perspective. And so I think, Commissioner Curry, some of that is by nature of just where the dominance or the concentration is of accommodations. So when you talk about a snowbird, the options they have from Miramar Beach condominiums to 38 houses, that same scope and scale doesn't exist, you know, north of the bay. So I think that's where some of those questions tend to focus that way. But I think you'll see in the later conversation, we are looking at a very broad spectrum of
Yeah, I just wanted to see
opportunities.
a little bit more of attention towards, you know, the north end of the county, that's all. Whatever we can. I know we don't have a lot, per se right now, but I mean, we can always think of
Yeah.
something outside the box.
Just want to add one piece here, because as we go through this, if you think about strategic planning, part of it is the question you're asking, which we think is right on, but also structurally, so organizationally, you know, how does this evolve our prioritization? Because we think that these are all, and we're going to talk about these after we go through the survey a little bit more, but part of the strategic side of this is sort of not just saying, wouldn't it be great if, but how do we adjust so we really can support some of those efforts? What does that look like? And how did the commissioners / steering committee, everybody sort of support that potential shift? May not be huge, but there's a potential resource shift in there we want to certainly talk about.
Thank you.
And also, I guess, to maybe over-index on this as well, we're talking about where we are in the journey, and that's where we are is in the journey. So we didn't, today is not about giving you recommendations on where this would come. So, but thank you for reminding us of that, the impact and importance of that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Drake, did we get your answers okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, I think to answer maybe Commissioner Curry's, where he's going with this, I don't know what the answer is, but I do recognize that for every $1 invested in an area where there's a high concentration of people, the return is going to be larger. So if we have to decide as a TDC where we're going to spend our money, if $1 invested in a local, you know, in the economy around the beach area, the return on that is going to be significantly higher. And then to invest $1 in some of the remote areas, the return is going to be significantly lower. So one, I think it's healthy to attract or to chase after those emerging markets, whatever that is. I know there has to be an emerging, you know, a emerging market industry that we can, you know, kind of put a larger emphasis or a larger focus on. I don't know what that is. What is it, or what are you seeing in other areas of the United States where they've managed, I mean, obviously we don't grow grapes like they do in Napa Valley. We don't have, you know, the mountains and things like that. But with the land that we do have, what is it that we can offer, you know, to chase that new client, that new culture, that new customer?
I think what we see is a word that you guys use, and I think is one that is sometimes overused, and that is when you're authentically connected to who you are, that draws really well. It's when you're trying to be something you're not that kind of gets you in the weeds. And so as we look at other destinations, when you can connect back to grape growing in Napa Valley and be really authentic about that, it's really uniquely sort of a point of differentiation. I think the one thing that you could say is probably all four of these things is you are a very affluent market. And so
We don't want to lose that.
some of that is that is on some level who you are. And so again, trying to then look at markets that aren't affluent and to try to attract them, your return on investment is not going to be as strong as looking at that bread and butter sort of base that you've cultivated for a long time and are still very relevant for. So the emerging markets can tend to feel like they're elusive, but they aren't. They're easy. I think they will be easily defined at sort of when we get all this information together. But I think the other part that comes into that's really important is north of the bay doesn't have to be at the expense of south of the bay. There are opportunities to create things that are demand drivers for both. That when someone is here in the South Bay to go experience north of the bay, there are opportunities that we think are very relevant in terms of that experience. That can be not an either or, but a yes and. And so how they look, how you would then evaluate their recommendations in terms of an ROI would be through a lens that is developing and continue to be relevant not necessarily just through the bricks and mortar that develop, but how it impacts the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, I don't disagree with one thing that Commissioner Drake said or you said, but it's hard for me to keep all my eggs in one basket, so to speak. I think every once in a while you need to take that chance somewhere on something to see how it works. I mean, it's always comfortable to pick that low-hanging fruit. It's sometimes you got to take that chance and see what happens by focusing everything and depending on everything on the south end. It leaves us wide open for some economic downfalls. Like
Yeah,
it's one of
and I
your
think,
weaknesses.
Mr. Drake, part of this is we want to study. We haven't yet done this, but we do want to study where those opportunities are. So some of the things we do in other destinations is from the outdoors perspective, is we look at just about every possible outdoor activity that kind of exists, because we know there are enthusiasts out there. You can name an activity and there's an enthusiast crowd there, and look at how competitive our experience is, or can we do things to it. So we're going to work through a lot of that you're talking about, and really excited to come back and talk about it, and then what are the implications.
Thank you.
Yes, Stephanie, please.
Sorry. I would like for us to consider potentially moving the workforce shortage. Any of the other bed tax collectors might be able to weigh in, but that hasn't been an issue. It can be something that we think through, but hasn't been an issue for us in the past 2 years plus. And I actually think there's actually opportunity, because this destination is nationwide. We're seeing colleges, universities, trade programs focus more on hospitality, home care, and I think that we can actually recruit more for this area, or can drive in greater skills. But I don't necessarily, and I know from being active right now and hiring people, the workforce shortage is not currently an issue. Not saying
That's
we need to
good.
take it off, but it's not something we're experiencing. But I do think there's opportunity as the industry in itself and tourism becomes more professionalized, that this area is well known to recruit those individuals.
Elizabeth, do you have a? Okay.
I think other areas have shortages, but it may not be in their tourism, but restaurants and I know hospitality in general, hotels here have a hard time. We're having a lot of people from overseas, from other countries on these programs, like that. I think it's still there.
Our stakeholder engagement, we did hear from some tourism stakeholders that workforce was an issue, and they were tended to be in the larger hotel operations, and then again some of the restaurant and some of the ancillary services that it was a little harder.
Okay, so that's a good subject to kind of dig into. So, Ms. Edwards brought out that if you're looking at things now, generally speaking, the workforce is there, and we're thankful for that. Ms. Hafner made a statement about a lot of our workforce being migrant workers, if that's an appropriate word to use, or people that are coming in from overseas on work visas. If that goes away, do you think we have a shortage at that point?
I think that's a lot more seasonality as well in some of those positions based on duties. I'm not saying it's not, I'm definitely not saying it's not there, but I do think that it's not.
But is a lot of it, is a lot of the stability because we do have overseas workers, do you think? Or can we survive without it?
So personally, we can't survive without it. I've seen less J1s this year than I normally have seen, just because it's been down a little bit more, and so people didn't know when to start hiring because things weren't on the books as far in advance as before. I do think that we have to rely on it. I think it's a greater conversation of how much are we paying these individuals, what benefits are we getting these individuals, what are we offering hours-wise, and then are we promising them a full-time job later on, or are we promising just a seasonal job? And so
I will say this is a very positive statement, that you're not a cookie cutter destination. And so I'd be really cautious to say that you don't have a workforce shortage or you do have a workforce shortage. You do in elements that were described, very clearly. There are the types of operations that have really high seasonal demands, that have a very different relationship to the delivery of the product than a vacation home rental does. There are nuances there. And so, yes, there is both, not and there is. But because of the scope and scale of the product you have here, it is a much more complex issue than someone that has 95% hotels and everyone experiences workforce shortage when the destination is 95% hotels.
So Tiffany, when the kids go back to school, who's replacing them in the workforce?
There's not a seasonal.
It's done.
So they're set just for 3 months or 4 months, and then they just know that,
So the industry just says, we had a good ride, and then we're going to kind of take some time off.
And most of the time they're hired with that. I mean, I should say, I would hope most of the time, I know for all of the individuals I'm involved with, that they're known on the front end that it's this amount of time, we'll have some hours, once the season slows down, a bit longer.
I just want to add one piece on this issue tied to this process, right? So we're noting everything. So everything we're talking about like this, we want to make sure we go back and sort of think through this, because one of the outcomes is, let's assume there are opportunities to support workforce development, let's call it. Then the question becomes, from an organizational perspective, prioritization, what role does the industry play, in this issue? And we want to talk through that. So what we don't ever want to do as JLL is come back and say, wouldn't it be great if we did something? We want to talk about the issue and then say, how can tourism resources, organizationally, how could we support that particular issue going forward? So that's another part of the outcome here, is to sort of think about that. We don't figure that out today, but we want to figure that out with you as part of the outcome.
Yeah, that's some of those ideas or these areas that I would like to improve on, even if it's 10%. Some of these 3-month dead course. In the trucking industry, when I had to deadhead somebody, it killed me because I'm spending the money, but I'm not making any money. So that's the same thing here. You're still manning the hotels, or employees are at the hotels. You're still doing things, but there's nobody there making any money. So those areas or those couple months would be great if we did. Let's start small. Let's do something. Get it up 10%. Something.
I think the restaurant industry, that part of the industry countywide has a shortage of workers. And there's plenty of evidence of restaurants that don't open on a regular basis because they don't have any employees. And there are restaurants and service stations, things of that nature, that are closing because they can't get employees. So while one segment of the industry may have that might be of strength, it's a definite weakness for others. And if you don't have restaurants and gas stations, you don't have the rest of them will suffer eventually. So I think overall it's a weakness.
Well, years ago, a lot of the restaurants on the south end closed in January because they didn't have the business. I don't think they do that anymore. I haven't noticed any of them doing that in the last several years. But they're obviously not as busy as they are in the summertime. The wait's not as long, so us locals kind of like that,
And I think is that ebb and flow of the industry and how it impacts and intersects with the life of a resident. And those are the things that I think we find the most compelling about this work that we do is again, looking for those 10%, but also recognizing that there's been an evolution of the industry. Tim was talking earlier about, you'd close for 3 months and someone would go to Colorado to work and then come back. And you can look at that with fondness and say, I wish we could close and go work in Colorado again, but back in the day. Or the sense of where we are right now, and that yes, there is still some seasonal implications in the business. Everything we see externally shows that your hotel revenues do fluctuate, and there is definitely a season. But the baseline from which that off-season is starting is very different than it was 15 years ago. So there's real opportunity to make an impact in the shoulder seasons and provide a year-round experience in a way that capitalizes on and builds off the foundation of sun and sand, but also really leverages what you're doing really well right now in terms of art and culture and wine and music and things that you've you've got a nascent brand that has real opportunity.
So like, for instance, if you studied the restaurant industry, are they seasonal because the demand is not there? Or are they seasonal because the workforce is not there?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, the workforce, the seasonality.
But could they,
means-
if you had the, let's just say you could replenish the workforce, would they still choose to be seasonal, or is it just not worth it?
You'd need to have the demand. I think
Right.
it probably all starts with demand.
Aren't doing anything, why you would want to work there, nothing for their staff. Then you can see other restaurants like the Chick-fil-A, they're not seasonal, they're doing fine. Beauchamp's, the Shades on 38, it's a good restaurant. Everyone in there, the back of the house is making money, front of the house is making money. A lot of these places, where you see health money, which is a weird term to even say anyway, rather than staff. They're crummy places. They should close. They're not doing anything. Why you would want to work for that?
Commissioner, when you can have both an audience that is both the visitor and the resident, I think that's what Tim is sort of saying, is that audience, it does support a year-round business. But there is a reality that there is still peak demand in certain times of year. I don't know, I grew up in the industry, I've been in tourism all of my life. Everybody I've worked for has never been philanthropy that they're in for, they're in for business. And so demand has to be there to have that workforce. But even if there are times, as noted, when you have demand, you don't have workforce. And I think that's where we got to be, be forward-looking and look to help to solve that area.
So here's another thing that just popped into my head. I hate to keep picking on you, Tiffany, but well, now I've forgotten where I was going.
We're here till 3:45, so
I'll-
if it comes back.
I'll come back to it in a minute. I'll get rezoned in.
This is great discussion. This is exactly what we hope would happen here. Yes.
So what is the family you think of workforce housing? How does that play into the workforce that is needed or may have or may not have?
So I have a long-term rental company. The pricing in this area, we actually have a lot of inventory, but what we're thinking of inventory are really a lot of condos, townhomes, multifamily complexes, as opposed to a home that's affordable. I said this earlier, I want to make sure when we talk about affordable housing that we keep it separate, that tourism doesn't, our industry is not creating the causation of affordable housing. But knowing that there are issues there based on just overall our price per square footage, overall interest rates. I mean, there is a lot of that is absolutely here. What you're seeing now on some of these multifamily complexes that I know I'm competing with them right now, 2 months for free, 3 months for free. But a one bedroom is also anywhere between $2,300 and up. That is very difficult for anyone to start. And not only that, but if we want families here, they're not moving into a one bedroom. They'd like a little yard. Geographically, on the south side, we don't have as much ability to continue to build up, and a lot of that is turned into, some of the, it's higher price based on proximity to the east. So I'm not gonna say that there isn't an issue here, I just wanna make sure that it's not 100% our solution, but we should be part of the conversation, and we're not a complete causation of, but we do need to be a part of the conversation to help provide a solution.
Let me just pick up on that sentence, part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So what we find in a lot of places is we are not part of the conversation, meaning we, the tourism industry. So that's an example of an outcome to say we believe strategically and we want to work with the team and what does that actually look like, but that we want to be at the, we sort of want to be at the table. So that's an example of taking a proactive step in this area And that really is what we want to work on with everybody, and then have everybody look at the outcome and go, yeah, we agree with that sort of focus. So that's that's not a small statement, because our industry in general has kind of taken that, are we in, are we out sort of role, and we want to talk through that and really think through it together. So I'll just,
I think you got something going, I mean, it has to be talked to almost simultaneously with workforce housing and affordable housing. But number one, you gotta find out what's the definition of affordable, and where is that definition at? It's not affordable in South Walton unless you have 10 workers sharing a one-bedroom, with a pull-out. And as you go up north, it does get better, but you're not gonna have people that's gonna work in South Walton living in Paxton. So, and I know developers are in it for money. Everybody's in all of this to make money. Nobody's in any of this to be free. So, but you got to find that, where's that balance at? And I don't know what that balance is. I mean, but I think the first step is figuring out what does affordable, what is that defined? What is that number?
I would just say there are a lot of people that work in Paxton, or live in Paxton, that work in the South End.
Yes.
And they live in Sampson, they live in Geneva, they live as far north as Troy, and Brantley, Laverne, as far east as Calhoun County. We've got people coming from all over the place. And one of the things, sometimes you have to accept reality. And the reality is the land values in South Walton are never going to be conducive to producing a lot of affordable housing, because it's just costs too much. You can't make any money on it. So I think we need to make sure, or need to try to look at our neighbors and homes in Geneva and Covington, North Walton, to find those places to have affordable housing, and then we figure out how to get them to the workplace.
That's where transportation becomes part of an affordable housing conversation. I mean, I think those are the things that I think, as we talk about the engagement of the community, that's why you would see something from us that would look like, okay, this is a conversation to have, because you've got this level of engagement. You can have that conversation, and you can find those solutions.
I think we made a mistake in the past of saying we've got to have affordable housing in South Walton, and that's not really realistic. And plus, where the affordable housing maybe should have or could have went, it turned into inventory. And that's not a bad thing. That's why we went from $30 to $60 million in receipts on the TDC tax. So sometimes it's not a bad thing. Sometimes you just have to accept what reality is. And reality is a house that a one-bedroom apartment is $2,300 a month. It's not affordable for most of our work.
I think some of these apartment complexes, I think the market's going to take care of itself, and I believe many of these apartment complexes, they're going to have to adjust, and they will become affordable housing.
I think you're exactly right.
And we'll have lots of it.
Because the market is going to adjust, and I think we've overbuilt.
The other conversation when it comes to is living in condos.
Right.
That is a greater concern.
Right.
I know from the Destin area, which is still a shorter commute than Paxton, one bedrooms over there around $1,800, right? For some, I mean, they're older, right, but that's a big difference.
And less of a drive.
And less to drive.
But people have been driving forever to come to work down here. And in the summertime, it's worth it for them. They're making a lot of money. And,
New York City, look at the people in New Jersey, they're commuting in, what, I don't know how long they
right.
if you're a company.
And most of them don't want to live on the south end.
Jersey looks different, an hour and a half a day, although it is rail. So most places in this country, if somebody really wants to do it, our jobs don't pay much. I don't know why you can get $2,200 a month rent. I don't know anything. An engineer probably just they pay $2,200 or $2,500 a month unless they happen to buy a house and finally go and have 3% mortgage.
And again, we would say therein lies the opportunity for you
Brian?
because of the diversity.
So is this discussion about workforce housing, is there any consideration for low-income housing, and then it's become untenable place to live. So private enterprise isn't what they're building.
Well,
Yeah, just a little bit on this. So we've seen plans where owners essentially are incentivized to build housing, but it's primarily for their own employees, but it still helps serve the audience we're talking about. So we definitely, there's a lot of examples. Transportation was mentioned, this type of thing. These are all really important possibilities that we want to kind of sort of sort through together, come back, and have everybody go, yeah, or wait a minute, now you're going too far, or that's the right balance of where we see from a tourism perspective that sort of engagement and what that looks like. Because that's really, a lot of these are just in terms of other work that we do, almost everything that's been brought up has been, the tourism industry has looked at these things, and in some cases they're definitely in them. But and we're not necessarily advocating for that, by the way, today, but we really want to work through this so there's a great outcome that everybody goes, that's achievable. That really sets the stage for where the industry can get engaged. Everybody's comfortable if there's some resource shift there. So everybody kind of is, and that's what we want to kind of work through.
Well, that's what I was talking about. I mean, these are great outside-the-box ideas that are coming forward. I like the transportation idea. Maybe there's a public-private partnership type thing that we can do to get these people from Alabama to South Walton to work.
Exactly.
Man, I just think that we're constant. We got to take these blinders off.
Right.
We got to look around the whole room, not just where
Yep.
we've been and where we think we're going.
Well,
Absolutely.
there is a parking area, there's a parking area at the south end of the 331 bridge where a lot of the people that are coming in from the north side, they park there and then they're picked up and they're taken down to the beach area. So we do have at least one of those. I believe also that one of the developers in Freeport is building some in-place workforce housing there to support the businesses and everything that he's got right there as well. And I know that there's one on the south end that's a vendor that has also made housing available for his workers, which has worked out great. So there are a few pockets of that going on within the county.
Sandestin has done it for years.
Yes,
Years.
yes.
And their expansion of their program forced Mr. Carvin
Mhm,
to
mhm,
find his own, and so he's done a great job. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful place.
yes, yes.
Historically, companies did that.
Mhm,
My father's time, the pump company, they had employee housing, at their plants all over America. Steel mills had, all kinds of companies had housing, for their employees.
mhm.
The old lumber
I
company.
mean, that was pretty common. And everybody realizes now it's a pretty good idea.
Right.
I think that's probably the model that's most viable because it also aligns with economic, well, if you believe in conservative economics, it marries up with the principles of conservative economics, where it's not the government that is trying to resolve that issue. It's the government creating an environment so that entrepreneurs and visionaries can resolve that issue on their own. And I think, Commissioner Johns, were you talking about the beach chair company? Yeah, they did that, I'm just going to use a number, let's say 20 years ago. So I think that's kind of the
No, about 3 years ago. They purchased it
okay,
from
so
the church.
that was a terrible number to use. So they've been doing that in the last few years, but I think that's kind of, I kind of think that's probably the direction that would work best. And if there are things that we can do to incentivize that, then that's where we put the weight of the government in that we create those, we offer tools in the toolbox so that, they can do what they can do, and we give them all the means necessary without us actually doing that, and it becoming, more socialistic from the aspect of the government intervening in the private markets. We're getting out of the way, but we're also offering encouragement for them to do things like that, and then it works well. But back to my synaptics were,
'Cause you're back.
were misfiring, but they just kicked back in. I was going to ask you, Tiffany, is there like a spot market that exists for vacation rentals. Let's say when the summer goes into overtime, to use a football analogy, because usually we got great warm weather up until, just end of August, and then September rolls around and it gets cold, and so we lose that. But then, like right now, like this weather is perfect, so it's kind of a unique opportunity where we're offering July weather in the latter part or the early part of October. Let's just say it's that weird circumstance where the weather is on our side, and we get warm weather all the way through, up till Christmas. Is there an industry or a market that kind of just, I'll call it I'm going to coin my own terminology, I'm just going to make it up, the whim market. So let's say you got family in some remote area of the United States, and they're like, honey, let's take the kids down to Florida for the weekend because the weather's great, where normally they would have already done that. But now that the weather's cooperating, is there a spot market to where people that have the means to travel and vacation, do we see that to where people just on a whim say, where you start seeing bookings that normally wouldn't be there, but all of a sudden on the weekend, in a warm weather, with a warm weather opportunity, are people doing that?
So I'll say there's a couple things there. One, we are. I think we're doing it really well. We are dictated because of our demographic and feeder market to families and the kids' school timeframe. I think overall as an industry, we've seen in the last year a rapid change of a booking window coming so short, and the Fed tax collectors who are sitting around the table are some of the best in the area and have really dialed in and speak to the actual marketing and numbers there of those last minute kind of targets. But if you look around probably the entire country, the ones that don't hit those peaks are ones that are an older generation that aren't bringing kids in school to the area. And so I think we're really dictated by some of that school calendar and schedule. I would say that, and I think Kelly's team has done a really good job of this, but I think we have to look a little bit more, and that's why the events are good, some other adult type trips, the girl trips, the golf trips, the whatever it may be, friend trips coming around birthdays, and that's where we kind of fill in potentially some of those pockets, but, I think we can probably.
Can I add just to what you're, is the homeschool market, would that be something that the whim factor would we look into? I mean, homeschool is just booming nowadays. Because they can take vacation anytime they want.
Well, and I just think the biggest challenge to your question, Dan, I think is going to be, how do you identify, that's a hard market to identify. When we talk about targeting, how you are gonna ascertain, extrapolate who is homeschooling, who you're targeting. As far as the weekend warriors is what we've always called them, I still think that's definitely a fair factor.
Is that chaseable?
In the off-season? Great question. Is it the ability to target them? It's really just targeting your current core market that you know the drive-in time on, keeping it probably from Atlanta, over to Tally, over, to New Orleans. But yes, you can target that. And I think another thing that we've seen in the industry this year is most of us have shortened our minimums. So in these bigger homes, less than 3 nights, a lot of the homeowners have always philosophically been like, that's not really worth it to us. But I think you're seeing more and more that are willing to accept the true just weekend stay. We're coming in Friday night and we're out of there on Sunday afternoon. So I think it's a good question to leave open-ended for further development is how would you and could you target those people?
I mean, in other markets, that whim market that you called it, they're driven by.
You're the third person that said that, so thank you for
I
allowing
just
me
wrote
to
it down. I gave you credit too, Commissioner. I said
create my
Commissioner
own
Drake. I wrote
phraseology.
It's going to be in our next proposal. It's going to be the whim market, AKA Commissioner Drake. I guess those of us in marketing sort of knows what drives whims, and I think people automatically think, well, it's discount. You can drive that whim by discounting your product. That's not going to fit this market. That's not what this market does. So you're going to look at things like event strategies around food and beverage, wine, art and culture, those things that the affluent adult market is going to be whimsical about. And what you just mentioned, you talked about stag parties and,
Oh,
and,
yeah, just
and,
the
and, and bridal
targeted
showers. Those
reunion.
things happen all year. They're not tied to a schedule. They're again, a market that we think does have a lot of relevance here. And the opportunity we talked about the changing demographics and the opportunity, that is a fact of life as people have less and less time. So how do you capitalize on that? Brian?
I think that's a good point, and I love the fact that we're thinking so much about the shoulder seasons and the off seasons, but I think one of the keys to success there is concentrating demand in a particular week or weekend, right? I think having events that drive that is important because, you know, pricing is super elastic over the summertime. I'm having this conversation with a lot of my homeowners, a lot of my clients at the moment right now, because we're seeing guests are tearing down, right, to save money just because of what's going on in the economy right now. They're tearing down in size of home, price of home, right? They're tearing down in length of stay, but they're also tearing down in season. We're seeing a lot of people that used to come over the summer are now coming right before summer, right after summer, because prices can be half, right? So we're seeing that happen a lot, and the first thing that I get as a response from one of my homeowners or one of my clients is, well, that's great, let's raise the price. You know, like, jack up the price in the shoulder season. We're like, no, that's not how that works, right? Because pricing is very elastic over the summer, right? So it's actually, it's a net negative effect, right? It sounds great at first, but if we're taking high value peak weeks, right, and we're losing opportunity because pricing is coming down on those, we're not able to raise the price in the shoulder seasons, it's actually a net negative effect on the entire year. So I think just big picture is we want to embrace the shoulder season. I think a key to that is concentrating demand over a particular weekend, over a particular event, where we can have elastic pricing, where we can say, hey, let's bring the price up in this, as opposed to these weekend warriors, like, you know, the whim travelers. I think it's great. We love to see them.
You're number 4.
Yep, that's the way we're calling it now.
Everybody figure out some way in the meeting to use it. Yeah.
We love them because it's incremental revenue, but it's low value revenue, right? You know, it's nice that there's something. It keeps you know, homes and right, keeps the team active. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really move the needle like, you know, like a summertime week does.
Well, it's September when we look at school starting in August. We call September, you know, we talk about the shoulder season from the hotel. That's stroller month because when we, in September, those are the couples that have children that aren't in school yet. May not spend as much, but that's who's here when school's in session.
I did want to go back to what she just said. I mean, I just went ahead and Googled homeschool market and I mean, do we have a social media that could focus on that? I just looked it up in 5 minutes and found 5 or 6 different sites that we could probably focus on.
In the steering committee meeting prior to this, you know, the one before this, we talked a lot about the whole notion of adjusting approach, and this is already going on. But another kind of strategic validation, if you will, from the steering committee and the commission, everybody, is to say, we really support sort of continuing this evolution of very targeted, segment-based marketing, right? And we think that that's really going to move the needle. So you talk about specific tied to either an event or tied to target markets, and just that broader support of that. Because, you know, sometimes in our industry, people get stuck on that. I always talk about the 4-color ad that's in Southern Living or wherever it may be, and everybody goes, okay, that's great, and passes it around. And what we're really saying, and what everybody, and we're doing it, but the validation that segmentation and that focus is really the future. So that is kind of a philosophical piece too. And I think a lot of support for that, a lot of this discussion ties to that.
I'd like to add that under the whim factor.
That's 4 and 2.
Okay, Commissioner Drake. I've never called it whim a traveler, but I usually call it a needs-based traveler. And what you're
I renamed it today.
I'm going to rename it on my slide. It's going to, instead of needs-based, it's going to be whim. But like I said, I have a slide. But we talked about this in the steering committee earlier. We do have different segments that we talk about, and we are talking to each of those segments separately, and we are talking to each of those segments together. So again, you know, just because I'm talking to the homeschool traveler, which is someone that we would talk to regardless if if they meet all of the household requirements, then yes, they're gonna get that information because we won't need to know if they're homeschooled. We'll just know that, they meet the household requirements, they live in the correct zip codes, and they're interested in traveling to the beach. So no matter what, whether they're homeschooled or not, we'll still get them.
I
So
just didn't
we're-
know if we could market something towards those
yeah,
particular
we could.
websites or
We
those
could
social
through,
media sites.
and there could be some ways that we could look at that, definitely, just in particular. But what I'm trying to say is that all of these together, we have a whole campaign running. I call it Extend Your Summer, and it goes to some of those places where it gets kind of cold, but it's still drivable in, like the Memphis, the Chicago, those kind of places. Especially if there's a direct flight from there. Like right now, there's a direct flight from Chicago. That as soon as it turns cold, I'm immediately marketing white sand beaches to them because you want to get out of the white snow. So what we call it, what you were talking about, we just call it Extend Your Summer. So we have all of that going on within the different segments of all of the things as well.
Overtime.
Huh?
Overtime.
Overtime, I love it. I'm not real good at sports ball, but maybe if we sit together a little bit, I can figure that out. But yeah, we do all of that. And that's part of what we do. So.
I think this is a conversation that's ripe, because I don't know that other people, and I never thought about that, so thank you, Commissioner Curry, for introducing this discussion, but I don't know that other states are trying to chase after or capture that brand, but like, I think it's something that we have an opportunity to talk to our leaders in the state government about partnering with the Department of Education, because if you're paying attention to Florida government, there is a significant amount of focus and reshifting into the value of homeschool education. And so if the state is making that a priority, then shoot, this is a prime time to get up on that wave and ride along with that. So if there is and I think that there is, like we could partner with the Florida Department of Education and the Florida Department of Commerce, and maybe introducing that concept. To my knowledge, nobody's having that conversation, but it kind of emanating out of today's discussion, we could be the ones to, one, introduce it statewide, and then number two, we make Walton County the central focus for that type of customer. So we need to kind of move quick in meeting with our legislative delegation, with Senator Trumbull and Representative Abbott, and then our leaders with the Department of Commerce and Education, and say, hey, we're buying into this concept, and in fact, we're ready to go full steam ahead, and we want to work at a state level in making Florida, i.e. Walton County, central or a central partner in this type of venture. So I think that's something that maybe at our BCC meeting, next one that we have, maybe we ask our lobbyists, and then we also relay this to our legislative delegation when we meet with them, that maybe let's take advantage of this and put us on the map.
I agree.
Great.
Very productive discussion. Glad you're back.
Stay tuned.
Okay. With no further ado, the long-awaited public survey. Where I want to start is by sort of noting that surveys are living, breathing organisms until you close them. So in the spirit of needing to get the agenda out, we had 1 week of survey in the market, so that was the 277 responses. We now have an updated survey, which closed on October 3rd, but it was from October 1st, where we had 974 respondents. Our goal was 475, so we feel really, really positive about the statistical relevance of the survey because of the number of people that responded. That change in numbers also changed the demographics of it a little bit. So we have the slide deck that we have to share with you is the updated information. You have a printout of the old information, so I can kind of walk you back and forth about what some of the nuances were, some of the significant changes. So this was probably the biggest change between the first week and the latest results as of October 1st, was that the the demographic of the population shifted. So you had the early first respondents were very, very committed local residents, so 70% of them were local. This has shifted to being, now it is 46% resident, 53% non-resident. One of the things that I hope you'll notice throughout here is that, and I think you recognize this clearly, is that you do have a lot of workforce who doesn't live in Walton County but works in Walton County. So these would be tourism-related work and other workforce that had access to or were invited to the survey. So there is highly likely a very direct connection to the industry here, but we do have, again, this sort of little shift in the demography between local resident and between resident and non-resident. The next slide is around the zip codes that were the dominant zip codes in the response. So this is from the resident surveys. This is the top zip codes that responded. We intuitively feel this represents population pretty sort of as well. So there wasn't anything in the steering committee, the work we did, that sort of felt out of place. I would sort of ask you the same. You know these zip codes much better than we do. Sort of, it feels like it works. Just want to make sure to get that sort of touch base to make sure you guys all feel the same. Next was employment. So you can see here that the employment in the industry grew from the last survey from 64% to 77%. The not employed in the industry grew, and the industry, I'm employed in the industry, dropped just a little bit. So again, residents, you can really feel the residents are a very important and impactful part of this, as well as the workforce. This is a very broad question to really ascertain what you'd say the sentiment about the impact of tourism. So this, by nature of how we ask the 5 different questions, we sort of bucket very positive and somewhat positive as a positive response. So the overwhelming sense, the majority of people here feel a really positive sense around the impact of tourism on them and their family. That is very different than the question we have later about the economy, the impact of the economy. This is a very personal way to ask this question about the connection to the industry. And again, a very positive sentiment here about how industry affects the participants in the survey. So the next one is a little bit more specific on the importance to the economy. So how important is tourism to the economy? And again, that positive, the important category, overwhelmingly strong recognition that tourism is a very, very important part of the economy, both regionally and locally.
So quick question.
Yes.
So if you look at this survey, you have your very positive, somewhat positive, neutral, somewhat negative, and very. Do we have any cross tabs that reflect why the surveyee felt negative about the tourism element?
We have crosstabs based on demographics, so I can crosstab between resident and non-resident.
But we don't have any, like, so somebody answered.
We didn't have those questions that said to break that down at the goal of trying to be concise with the survey. We do anticipate, and one of the reasons we are very excited and have success in these public hearings that are coming over the next 2 days, is understanding that question a little bit more, getting some more context to what that is. It's hard in a survey to kind of keep it tight under 20 questions and have a lot of questions about value and specifics. So we don't have any cross-tabbing on the values, but we do have the cross-tabbing based on the demographics.
Because we all accept that we are a tourism county. Now, we're not closed-minded. We're not shutting down any other ideas. If there's something that our county can morph into that, or open some different types of opportunity and create other industries, I don't think anybody's closed-minded about that. But we do accept, I believe, that we are a tourism county. So I want to learn how we can coexist better among our residents. So if you have 17, 21, let's say almost a quarter of the respondents felt negatively about the impact of tourism on themselves and their family. What is that? I mean, I assume that it's going to be traffic, development, things like that.
Yeah.
But tourism is not going anywhere. So if we have created, if there are negative implications in being successful at what we do, we have to figure out how to make those people that live here that feel like they're negatively impacted, with our being a tourist central county, what is it that we can do? What can we offer to minimize that negative sentiment there?
Yeah, there's some further questions that I think relate to what you're talking about, and especially when you cross-tab and pull out the non-resident, it gets a little bit more specific. So we do have that, and we're presenting the overall, but I think if there's some time, we'd love to engage, a little deeper with that, and it will be very robust in as we sort of work out the next couple of months of finalizing the recommendations. But yes, there is a lot of insight there, and I think you'll see further in the survey where some of that comes from. Because you are a vacation tourism destination, there are some similarities in other destinations that have that same thing, and this tends to be traffic, cost of living, affordable housing. But they sometimes will, as Stephanie said, project onto the industry when it really is a factor of many things, not just the fact of the tourism industry, but the ecosystem here is more expensive to build in, right? Those types of things also are part of it. So what we've done on this with Matt and his team is identified some clear themes for future communication to the residents about the impact of tourism that will, in a sense, shed more light on the true impact. It was said earlier today that, we probably have, you all probably have, you call them Publix, like 5 Publix. That's an impact of tourism. A community of this size wouldn't have 5 Publix if it wasn't for tourism. There was an earlier comment that said even gas stations are in the tourism industry, because it is tourism that drives so much of it. Finding ways to articulate that and the benefits of that to someone who's stuck in a traffic situation that's where the nuance comes and the ability to sort of really clarify this message.
I think to piggyback on Mr. Drake, knowing the issues and focusing attention on those is half the battle. If we don't know that, then we can't fix what we don't know. And I think we need to drill down as far as we can to at least try and get a couple percentage points off of there. I know some of the things we can't fix, but we got to know what we can fix.
Very good point.
Is this a good breaking time? Can we take a 5-minute break?
That is up to you, absolutely. If it's
Let's
good
take
to
a
you, it's good
5-minute
for us.
break. Okay, thank you. Absolutely.
Okay, so back into it. So I think this gives a little bit of insight into what you were asking about. What do they feel negative about? And you can clearly see here that when you talk about rating the impact in felon areas, that you see some clear indications that things like traffic congestion, quality of life, natural environment, these are things that they would perceive as being a negative impact of tourism because of the way they've scored them clearly from very negative, somewhat negative, neutral. That bar in traffic is clearly an indication that is a negative impact that the respondents of this survey have articulated pretty clearly.
Sir,
Yes.
do you have any insight or explanation as to why cultural and community characters score so poorly?
It actually scored pretty good. So the
Very positive. I don't think that's good.
so you have the blue and the green, which are positive, which means almost 50% felt it was positive, whereas natural environment was lower than that, quality of life was lower than that. The clear indicator of strength of impact is the local economy was good. So I think it's kind of in the middle. And I would suspect, not any sort of definitiveness now, that we get to a further question is how are tourism resources reinvested in the community? I think that's an indicator that gets back to this idea of culture and community character.
I think it's a statement on growth
From the statistic of this report, it doesn't seem to be, because growth is given very positive sentiment. There's a strong sentiment that growth, moderate growth, and strategic growth is seen as very beneficial. So I don't necessarily think it's growth. I think it can be tied back to maybe identity and cultural identity. I think there's some of that. There's a real opportunity. If you look at sort of the brand of authentic Walton and sort of that experience that has created some of the mystique around Defuniak and that, there's elements there that I think maybe create some of that. TDC board members, any thoughts on that? You've seen this data. Tiffany? Amy?
No, I've spoken to
No, keep talking.
I think I did the exact same thing that Commissioner Drake did. I'm good.
Do you think that more cultural events could maybe make that better? More positive?
As an audience of one, I would say yes, there is a very strong opportunity to connect events from a cultural perspective to an event strategy that could be very impactful to that.
I do think identity in itself is really an important role. I also think that as from the bed tax collector, one of the driving factors for people to stay, and I would say from a vacation rental perspective, is to feel like a local, be a part of the local. And so to understanding what that identity is from the south to the north is really important for us to have that conversation, because that's what draws in our individuals to this area.
And the reason that hope or optimism from my perspective is the biggest category here is neutral. That's
Right.
your biggest category in the culture was neutral. So that's kind of like, I'm on the fence, so that's where the opportunity lies. Is the vast majority of respondents here felt that was a neutral thing. So again, very negative is the second lowest, the second lowest. So it's that neutral one that I think why that optimism is there.
Did they give any indication about, throughout the rest of this, about what sort of things would make them move that needle?
We didn't ask specifically.
Okay.
We will in some of the public sessions. That one of the questions we have is that we have 3 or 4 questions, and that's one of them. So
good.
one about a
And I
few other
don't
things.
know if it's appropriate to talk kind of a little bit more about our dialogue this morning by slide, or if I was just gonna kind of maybe wait till the end.
Bring it in, Amy,
Traffic
anytime.
and congestion, one of the things we talked about this morning that I think would be very impactful for us as well as for all of you is we all know all of these amazing projects that our beach ops guys are undergoing right now, but like how many parking spots have we added? Now, how many have we already got approved and planned? And then you can look from there at what we think we might need, but bringing it more concise rather than just looking at each project and where it's at. And we also, I think that's going to be, I think that's something that we're well on our way to improving. You're not going to improve traffic. The roads, to a great degree, I think, are what they are. And I think traffic most of the year has not been bad this year. We are definitely past COVID. So I think we'll also see just through natural circumstances and occurrences, I think some of those could get better over time.
Tiffany, were you going to remain silent, or are you going to, okay?
I completely agree. I think going through this, though, what we found this morning was that there's an education component, that we are not delivering the message to our residents of, you know, it's not just, you know, the Publix or, you know, the hospital that'd be there, but really what that contribution and quality of life, what it does help out with. And I don't think we're articulating what that is enough that it's just a blanket economic impact statement. Well, that doesn't necessarily drive down to when they're at home paying, you know, their bills or sitting in traffic for an hour. And so I think we need to figure out what those are, and we need to develop education and communication.
Well,
Yeah.
even with this, are you employed, with 77% saying no, there could be a portion of that that really are,
They just don't
They don't
realize
even
it.
know
Right,
it. If you
right.
work at one of the 5 Publixes, you are employed
Yeah.
by tourism.
Right.
Right, right.
To get to that, to the education, a lot of, I don't think we do a very good job of telling people the good, how their quality of life is impacted, because we have 90,000 full-time residents. And those 90,000 people are afforded wine festivals and very, the most beautiful beaches in the world, and a lot of different ways to get to them. The Bay, we've done a lot better on the Bay. I still say Funiac looks like a Hallmark thing. So there's a lot of good things that a citizen or a resident of Walton County has available to them that the normal county that's got 90,000 people don't.
Yeah.
And that's a direct response and a direct result of the fact that tourism brings a lot of different, more additional people here that makes those events and festivals and all that stuff, makes those things economically viable. So that's the story we need to be telling
Yeah.
is, the fact that you get a lot better quality of experience as a citizen of Walton County than almost any other county you can think of that's our size. If you want to go to Atlanta, that's different, but our size,
Yeah.
we've got a pretty good deal.
I think,
It's relatively, cost efficient. I was just in, one of my children lives in upstate New York, which is a tourist area. And I went to the grocery store when we got up there last week, and I had a heart attack because the prices are double what I was. And, so we've got a relatively efficient, cost-effective, economy on the, I mean, and it still has a lot of advantages. So we've got a good story. We just need to tell it.
yeah. The only thing to add there is how you tell it. Because what we have learned and what we think is a great outcome here is it's unfortunately not just as simple as kind of an email newsletter that comes out. Right? And so what are those, how do you drive the messaging that really makes that resident go, oh, that clicks to me? And like somebody was saying earlier, economic impact, those kind of things, our sense of those is there certainly is part of the population, but there's a lot of people, it just doesn't, you know, they see some big number, there's, you know, X number of visitors and there's X billion dollars of spending. If you think about it, if you're a person getting up every day working in some different industry, it really just doesn't resonate. So I think the opportunity here is to figure out not only, you know, the fact that we need to inform people, but the how of that and how we keep sort of testing different things and maybe even using some of this as a benchmark, just, you know, almost a baseline to keep working off of. Sort of saying, are we kind of moving the needles in some of these areas? But, and the other thing I just want to say real quickly is, you know, that quality of life answer, I was personally fascinated by that because it was so positive, right? There was part of me that wanted to delve into that and say, well, why are you, like, what caused you to make that positive statement? So that's the kind of thing I think we want to dig into, is what, you know, what prompts that.
And another thing I think that really needs to be a part of the central focus here is managing expectations. So for that new, I'll call them a customer a resident customer. That person that, you know, says, honey, let's leave Nebraska and let's move to Florida, and what do you think about Walton County? The expectation when they get here is that whether we wanted to develop or emerge as a tourism county or not, whether we wanted to do that 30 years ago, we have no control over that at this point. We are a tourism county. We generate our own existence by doing what we're good at and taking advantage of the characteristics of this county that are very attractive, and we're trying to do our best to protect that image and that brand. But I think if you look at some of the data and you see, like, if you look at it as a negative response, of course the obvious, traffic congestion, overdevelopment, things like that. Some may have the expectation of, well, we're gonna move down there and then we want all the traffic to shut down. So we don't wanna live in a tourism-focused area, but they do it anyway. So when you do that, well then, yeah, those responses are always gonna be negative. They're never going to improve. So I think where the room for improvement is that the expectation of the transplant, the person that moves into our area, they know they're moving into an area that is centrally focused on in harnessing the value of good tourism. How do we manage that coexistence? You're like, okay, you're here, we're glad you're here, you're now a valued person of the community, you're paying property taxes, you're making contributions. We want to, as government, to offer you a good positive experience and a good quality of life, and we'll have that good customer. But those that are disgruntled because we're good at doing what what we have to offer, we didn't get to make that decision 30 years ago. It happened whether we wanted to or not. So now we have that. We're not going to abandon that, because if we did, you're still going to have that customer in Kentucky that moves down here and sets up shop and says, this is where I want to live, because it's a beautiful area, it's good weather most of the time, it's it's a zero tax state as far as personal income taxes. All the things that Florida has to offer, that's going to continue to attract that transplant resident. So when they get here, if you said, all right, if we just all of a sudden, the Board of Commissioners said, all right, anything related to tourism we just want to abate and we want to change our identity, we're still going to continue to grow at, from 90,000 to 100,000 to 115. People are still going to be here. But if you cripple the industry that makes it possible for us to have enhancements and to live together amongst one another in a positive way, to have infrastructure development, to have nice amenities, you're still going to have the growth and then no means to invest in the growth and curb the negatives, if you will. So you can't just cut that off completely, because if you do, then it's a train wreck. So I mean, if there's one thing that I would want for everyone to kind of take away, if for those that are thinking about moving here, is that, look, this is what we're doing down here. We want to be mindful. We want to make your experience wonderful, but we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We can't. There's no way to do it.
So, surprise, I have 2 follow-ups for that, but one of it being that I think we get a lot of that feedback after really big peak weeks, weekends. Like, I think of the next door picture of someone showing all of the meat was gone from Publix. They're getting a lot of airtime today, but from Publix, and people being upset, there weren't groceries, and it's like, I know not to go to the grocery store on a Saturday, 4th of July weekend, but so I do think that there's a lot of that, but it comes from that peak. And then I don't want to get into it too deep, but I do think that's how much of this is also tied into some customary use and not having what was perceived as access to the beach and tourism coming in And, you know, those individuals almost seeming like they get more of the pie as opposed to the residents of here. And so I do think that we also, when we think about what that looks like for someone from Kentucky, you know, shortly moving in, that has to also be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, and it's not mentioned anywhere on the SWOT analysis. So I feel like it's something that we talked about in one of our city committee meetings, and it's the elephant in the room. I mean, that's.
Yeah, access, resident access.
Because we.
And we're we're
Yeah, we-
handcuffed from it, right? So there's,
It was intentional not to put it in this public survey. It was an intentional decision.
It's not anywhere as a threat or.
Yeah, I think some of us thought we may have added it from the SWOT analysis, just,
Yeah, that's good.
you know, making sure that we have that
Absolutely.
listed. And,
Yeah.
you know, and an offsetting point to that I think we've also discussed is, the importance of framing this thing under a very powerful, positive messaging. I think we have done Know Before You Go. I know Kelly and her team have worked on several different things, but I do think that it's continuing to kind of be that monkey on our back. And so we are gonna have to work on how we, and well, you know, there are benefits to having, whether you call them private or you just remove the word altogether, exclusive beaches in Walton County, also public beaches. And I mean, I don't know, that's not for me because I'm not the marketing girl in the room, I'm an ops girl, but at the end of the day, it's gotta be looked at. I truly believe that.
Sounds good.
I do have, I'm glad you lit the fuse on it. We can't sit and wait for the state or anybody else to renourish these beaches. We have to purchase beach access, or we already don't have parking spaces. I see it in social media, I see it in 10 emails a week that everybody is mad because there's no beach, there's no beach, there's no beach. To me, I think we need to focus on purchasing more beach, and you know what, if renourishment comes, it comes, but we need to purchase beach. We can't wait on handouts, we can't wait on bureaucracy 5 years from now when we're, you know, economically distraught because everybody's trying to hourglass their way into a 10-foot beach access point. So, I mean, to me, a lot of focus, and this might not be the meeting to
Well,
have
it's good
this
then.
conversation, but we need to focus on beach purchasing
And-
more so than anything else.
Well, it's also a parking problem, and that is something that we are working on. We do have a parking being built right now in Miramar Beach on Driftwood. We also have property that we've purchased to build a parking garage, and I'd like to see that thing start, because what we're gonna do there is, it's not far from the beach, so it's 5 acres, and it can hold a lot of cars, and then we'll have a shuttle that will take the people directly from that to the beach, and that will help in this number one traffic and parking problem right here. So we are addressing that, and there are some other parking lots that have been built recently within the community, so we're addressing them, probably not as quickly as we'd all like to see it happen, because everything takes time, but I'm real interested to see the first, parking garage, and I believe that they're looking at one right now doing with a public-private partnership in Inlet Beach, which is really, really nice, and so we can just grow from there.
But as we grow parking, we're gonna need beach for those folks to go to. I mean, you can create all the parking in the world, but if you
In
only got
Miramar
a
Beach, we
5-foot
have
swath
beach.
of beach, then you might as well put bunk beds out on the beach.
We have a pretty good amount of beach in Miramar Beach. It's already been renourished, but it's 30A, you're right, 30A needs to,
Well, and I think that's kind of why our conversation culminated earlier this morning on, that goes back to that. We need to know what Brian the team has already built, what is in process or already approved funding for.
Right.
And then what do we own that we don't, I'd like to see it on a one-page
Right.
almost,
Yes,
That
little
way we
bullets
could
of
really
everything.
then we could say, okay, absolutely, beachfront land is number one. But I think until we look at it that way, it's gonna be hard to determine exactly what the next step should be.
Yep.
But I do agree with you, Commissioner Curry.
well,
Hmm?
Go ahead.
We built, or we bought in the last 8 or 9 years, we bought $70 million worth of beachfront. And that's a lot of capital
Mhm.
We've got the money to do a good, or to at least get a good start on it. We just need the Army Corps of Engineers to just start. And we've been negotiating with the Army Corps of Engineers for years, and are no closer than we were. But,
Well, I just found out we didn't even put a flag in there yet on the ground of survey.
I know.
Well, the access, as we've discussed, an access doesn't mean anything once you get down a narrow access if you cannot walk east or west. Now,
Right.
we've got renourished beaches in Miramar, so
Mhm.
once you go past the private property, then you can access the beach.
Right.
But any access, once you get through it and then you have private property and you can't walk east or west, the only way this is gonna be solved is renourish
Mhm.
the beach. That's it. So that way those upland landowners can have all their signs they want, but you can still walk on the access and then,
Fan out.
Right.
yeah. So
Absolutely.
buying more property doesn't do us any good unless the person can walk east or west. And we've gotten calls about owners wanting us to manage their property. And I'll say, and our office will say, okay, tell us about the beach access. Oh, we have an east access. I said, yes, but can the public then go east or west? We don't want them just to go down and then be met with signs if it's, and then they kind of hem and haw, well, the neighbors are going, well, no, we won't take property unless we know our guests can go sit on the beach.
Well,
Right.
I'm a little impatient, when it comes to that, because I don't wanna wait another 15, 20 years
I don't
for a
blame
flag
you.
to go in the ground.
Well,
I mean, if the answer is all-knowing, that we buy a piece of property and it doesn't matter what anybody thinks that's our property, then where's the checkbook? I mean, Commissioner Gladwell said we spent 70 million. Didn't the governor just, buy 70 or 80
84.
million dollars?
84 million.
You know what? It's an investment. That's our widget. That's Walton County's widget. That's the only thing that we produce well is the beach. So if we don't have the beach, then we don't have customers to buy those
let's
widgets.
just start renourishing and make the state stop us.
I'd love to. Give me the phone number.
You know,
Give me the
just
address.
start-
I'll go visit them.
Good point, but that will not be in JL's recommendation. That's a good point. We're gonna keep that out of we're gonna keep that out of the strategic
You
plan.
go, Commissioner, you want the point.
But
So we can get to the other discussions. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Taylor made a good point. You know, while that's desirable to buy up more beach, the cost effectiveness of that is, it's very hard to get get to that baseline of meeting the need. At 70 million a chunk, if you buy a dozen chunks, what's that? That's we're getting close to $1 billion at that point. So you're looking at 12 chunks will cost $1 billion. That's a phenomenal number.
We can renourish for less the parking garages.
Mhm.
Then you can go across a parcel that Walton County owns that we
Right.
bought. If we have the parking garages, then you're down, then with renourishment, then all these people can then go east and west. And those property owners may go, well, I don't like that. Well, no.
Right.
I don't want to discount the idea of purchasing good land, because when we do have those opportunities to buy something that's very precious and that, you know, we can make that a part of our inventory in the county, we want to do that, but when they cost $70 million a pop, we're not going to get to do that often. So I don't think any of us will be around, if that's the strategy, is to just buy up, you know, multi-million-dollar chunks, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60, $70 million chunks of land a dozen times. You know, oftentimes that could be 12 acres. That's not really
Yeah, I
getting
don't
where
know
we.
how many acres that was for the 70 million. I don't know where we
Right.
got for
4.
that.
It was 84 million, it was 4
Oh, no, I'm
acres.
talking about,
Oh,
our
his,
Commissioner
oh,
has
okay.
about
Probably around 10,
acre.
Well, the renourishment would benefit every single resident of Walton County.
Absolutely.
And then we know they could find the accesses or the parking. And that is
We just gotta
the
get
way to
there.
do it.
here's our problem. And if you go back and look at the parcels we bought, we buy them, and then it used to be Mr. Kellenberger, it's fixing to be somebody else. They would announce the plans to build a regional beach access. And within the then we go on a 3 or 4 year court battle, and we've won every one of them, I think. And so then we start construction, but we're now 4 years down the road from buying the property to starting construction because we get sued. So it's been, I believe for a long time, that we're gonna get sued anyways. Let's get sued over renourishment.
Yes, indeed.
Not over, acre parcel of beach that's got 40 feet.
And that'll stop the lawsuits too. Once it's renourished, that's all for the public. And then these upland landowners, you're not sitting, if they think that is their sand, we're sitting in front of their house. Every single person. And then the parking garages, of course, are gonna solve that.
Right,
They're all over the country.
yes.
We're the only place that has.
Right.
It's frustrating.
We've got
I
the
know it's
property for it.
Frustrating from everybody else, including myself, but, you know, we've not taken a step any further than we were before the governor came down there and signed that bill. We have not gone any further. If anything, we are stagnant. Now everything is focused on renourishment. Now I found out 2 days ago that the Army Corps, we haven't even started to do a survey yet, but we paid them money or whatever the case may be. It may be another 3, 4, 5 years before we even think about renourishing. So that's
Well,
what I'm
keep
saying.
on
I
it.
mean, that's
Yeah,
my
that
frustration.
would-
that
Keep on
I
it.
don't like the speed of bureaucracy. And
Unless
Commissioner
the storm
Gladwell
came in.
laughs at me all the time, but that's the way government works. But I will never get used to why it takes so long to get anything done in government. I know that's my Achilles heel, but
It's not our democracy, unfortunately, it's the federal government.
Right.
We got a few more things to show.
Yes, come on, go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, she's right. I mean, it's big. I mean, it's great in terms of making sure that so let's go ahead. We'll keep moving here.
thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
benefits. Excuse me, Bertie. I apologize.
Yeah.
Again, so 76% of the respondents feel there's a big strong benefit in tourism. So we'll kind of move along on that one. So this is, again, sort of back to Commissioner Drake. This is, you know, how do you feel tourism is impacting, or are you concerned about tourism impacting these areas? And again, not to sort of, it's kind of the same stuff we've heard, traffic
Right.
congestion, housing affordability, environmental impacts. These are the things that are of concern, and I think every one of them relate back to what we've just been talking about, things that got a really good strategy. This next slide is the one that I think is, really impactful. And these are, you know, what types of development do you believe Walton County should prioritize? So we offered the suggestions, and they were able to choose up to 3.
Right.
So that's how this scoring on this went. And you can see from the initial survey to the final survey, there was some not insignificant shifts, but the ranking didn't change. Outdoor recreation was still number 1. Family-friendly attractions was number 2. And then what was deemed as eco-friendly, sustainable tourism was number 3. And we did not give a long, lengthy definition of what eco and sustainability means. I think it is one of the 3 questions we have, or 4 questions we have for the public sessions later today and tomorrow, to kind of understand, you know, what they feel that is. And we had a very robust conversation in the steering committee this morning about what that is. And it is a nebulous term. It can mean a lot of different things. We think there's an opportunity to tie it back to a lot of things. I think beach preservation is a very sustainable ethos that also can really speak well to this community. I couldn't say exactly what that means today, that the survey didn't, but that idea of somehow protecting the natural environment that is so intrinsic to the brand scores very high. That's how we read this information. It wasn't about developing an ecotourism park for tents and granola eating, you know, hippies to come. That wasn't what this was about. That was Tim wants that. Tim wants one of those, but this was we.
We're experts on that. We're all in your tent.
So we have internalized this as we look at the data as protecting the natural environment. That's where how we're reading this and looking at that.
Can I make a point?
Of course.
This as well. I think when you look at festivals and events, it really is an umbrella for a lot of these things. Family-friendly attractions, north of the bay, cultural tourism. So I think that if you look at it from a bigger perspective, it really is a large number.
Yeah. Just to add to this, because remember earlier today we talked about this sort of notion, a little bit of diversification or focus we talked about things. And so this, whether it's this exact list and whether it's this exact order, we want to work through this with the internal team and really come back and talk about this very specifically and say, does it make sense, and I'm going to use the term investment, but it could be time, looking at some of these opportunities. So if we say, to your point about events, you know, we believe that events in general from a tourism perspective should be proactive activities, meaning we're all saying to ourselves, these are the ones to focus on because they have the most potential, and then what does focus mean? And so we really want an outcome to be looking at all of this from a diversification standpoint and really coming back to the commission and steering committee and sort of talking through this and back to the point about shifting a little bit as it relates to resource and focus. So I just wanted to sort of make that point that this gives a great example of where the opportunities may be.
Absolutely. Not everybody wants to spend all 7 days at the beach. Sometimes they want to break away and do something different, so.
And the ability to kind of further on what Jennifer said, a lot of these things can be yes ands, right? There's a lot of these things can really cross-pollinate the way that they impact the community. This is a little also going back to Commissioner Drake's question about, you know, where does the negative come from? I think this is an indication of where some of that can come from. Some people don't feel heard in the process, and I think that is, again, going to be a very important part of our strategic recommendations, is how that communication happened with the locals. I think it is it the next slide? In the essence of time, there's a slide that comes up. The vast majority of your people that live in this community that have responded to the survey have lived here more than 10 years, with the majority being 20 years more. What we know from our work is people that are in a community that long learn how to get their information. They don't really seek out new forms of information very readily. So the art in this comes in how you talk to people who have been here a long time and who have a very definite rhythm and an understanding to what they look for. That's a big opportunity here. And I think that relates back to this question very well. And then this idea of reinvestment in the community is, again, another one where there's an opportunity that there is, again, not necessarily overly negative sentiment about the surveys, about the impact, but opportunity here. Yes?
Just sort of notice the question. So, yeah, we're not necessarily saying that this is exactly it, but people are, if nothing else, they're sort of curious. They're sort of going, okay, so what does happen with all that sort of tourism revenue? And we did mention a couple of things we talked about today, beach restoration, access, et cetera. So another opportunity from a information perspective, education perspective going forward, right?
And this one is where we got the information on growth. That, again, the majority, so 42 plus 15, so 57% of the people said that growth was an opportunity going forward. And very, very few responded there should be no growth or limited growth. So again, I think they understand the context that this is a business. Businesses grow and they look at that. But this idea through tourism moderately, another synonym for moderately is going to be strategic and well thought out, right? This handheld makes it hard to do both, talk and my hands too. Again, informed, I think we've talked about that plenty. How and will they feel informed? This one is the slide I was referring to. So you've got a very, very, very committed group of people who live here, who have been here a long time and who want to be here, obviously. So the challenge in communicating to audience like that, again, is that's where the opportunity and this strategy of how to do that is going to be really important. I think the last slide we had on this today was employment. So you can see that the vast majority of the people that responded are in the employed category, with retired being the most significant change in terms of numbers between the two surveys. Yes, Mr. Taylor. Oh, I thought you raised your hand. You were just turning the page with such vigor. So just as an FYI, here are the 3 public sessions we have today. We have one this afternoon, one tomorrow morning, and one tomorrow evening. And if you have interest, we'd love to have you at their public sessions. So we're quite excited about this and have a really great agenda for them. With that, we have 45 minutes left.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Can I ask a question about the agenda of these, like what the format is? Will you be going over the same thing today, or is it more input?
A very brief introduction of what the process has been, so a little bit of the demand driver, that kind of stuff, but just very, very high level. Then we have 7 slides on the survey, so they're going to see the response to the survey, and then we have a Q&A around these questions that we've noted. What is of value? What would you like to see? What does development look like? We have a question on sustainability, a specific question on what that means in terms of survey, and then sort of some open questions.
Do we know how many people, I know that we were trying to figure out registration, not registration, but a number of how many people would be?
So we didn't do registration in terms
Right.
of making people
Right.
register, so we don't really have a great way to gauge, proposed attendance. We shot this out every way under the sun, multiple emails, social media, everywhere we could think to. We've worked with the chamber, we've worked with the municipalities, the counties, so.
Should be. Okay,
Okay.
yes.
So a couple of things just as part of the wrap-up here.
Okay, then we'll do public comments.
Yeah, just looking at a couple of things. One, you think about processes like this that we've all been through. And you've heard us say a couple of times today about how what we don't want to do is have things that say, wouldn't it be great if? We really want to try to make sure the outcome is implementable, but where everybody looks at it and says, we already knew about that as a priority, but we actually have thoughts about how we're going to actually move on this. So that I'm sure you've seen a lot of plans that, everybody reads it and then they go on the proverbial shelf and no one ever. We just want to take a moment here on any thoughts or ideas or just things that from the board's perspective where you say, let's make sure that the outcome sort of is set up this way, or, we can really look at somebody's priorities and really maybe think about the how and not just what the recommendation is, and so things that would be helpful when you think about the sort of outcome here, in terms of what you, and we don't have to necessarily even answer that today, but we really want to make sure, same with steering committee, of course, is that we really think about what's going to be the most impactful.
Right.
Because everything we talked about today, we've all taken notes, and we want to look at literally everything we talked about and more, and then we want to come back and say, with the internal team and everybody saying, okay, here's where we think the top X number of priorities are, and then have everybody look at those and go, yeah, you know what, those are aspirational but achievable, right? There is a way to get from point A to point B. For instance, to occur to your point, there could be advocacy, but then let's organize the advocacy. So let's not just say we want to do this, but what's the advocacy plan around that issue? If it's
Do we have any kind of like a priorities list, goals list, and then percentage of those items achieved at?
Well, that's what, it's from an outcome standpoint of this process, we want to end up there. And we just started with the steering committee to sort of introduce a few potential priorities. So this is, we're early still in the process. So today is listening, as getting the dialogue, but then ultimately we want to head to exactly where you're talking.
I'd love to see like a top 10 or something, and then
Yeah.
see something quarterly or yearly or something. Where are we at with that goal that we talked about 2
Yep.
years ago?
Yep.
Instead of we make these lists, we make these goals, and like you said, we put it on a shelf, and then 4 years later, we have
Yep.
a workshop, and we do it all over
Yep.
again.
So at that point, is there any carryover, maybe this is for the staff, is there any carryover from the last strategic plan of items that haven't been achieved that need to be included in this strategic plan?
Yeah, so I think there was probably 3 or 4 items from the previous strategic plan that we just did not get to, for whatever that reason may have been, that we have as part of our plan to move forward.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, again, the most important thing as we come out of this is that whatever we decide the strategic plan to be, that it's measurable. And so I would think, I know you guys are in so many meetings, but, doing this meeting once every 6 months, maybe, just to check in.
Make
on,
sure
okay,
things are
this
getting
is what
done.
we talked about, this was the 10 items.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be something very
Yeah,
positive.
and we raised one thing, and Tim had some reaction to this, but we raised this notion of if we took a pie chart today So if we did a pie chart, we said, here's marketing, here's this, here's that. So everybody looked at a pie chart of where the expenditures are today. And maybe we could feed into this pie chart even the human resource side of it. And then we looked at the recommendation and we said, okay, so to do that recommendation well, that takes resource. There's going to be we don't just want to tell the internal team, go try to make that happen. We also want to think about, when I say resources, are there shifts in resources that need to be thought about? And I know that has to be done carefully. There's certain guidelines around what the dollars can be used for, but how do we make sure that we don't, because we've had this happen to us in a sense where we don't think through that resource question. Everybody sort of looks at the collective team and says, okay, and then all that really means is they've got to figure out some way to kind of stretch what they're doing as opposed to shift what they're doing. So we also want there to be an organizational kind of recommendation within it. And I can say, my sense is that's going to really take support from everybody.
Right.
Steering committee, board, everybody's going to have to go. We're willing to tell whoever, the stakeholders that we support these, whatever the sort of shifts are, and making sure they're aligned with, use of the funds. But that's another outcome. It's just to your point, Mr. Curry, that's an important outcome.
Yeah, and and I'm not against having all these workshops and steering committees and sinking committees or whatever we want to call them. But if we're putting time, effort, and money into something, it needs to be measured, and it needs to be measured more than once every 4 years. I mean, we need to come in this every 6 months, like you said. And let's talk about it. Hey, why have we not moved off of these 10 priorities that we sat down 6 months ago and set our priorities? Why have we not moved off of any of them?
And so part of the deliverable, and we'll work with the team on this, is that sort of Gantt chart, if you will, that says we've all taken let's say the issue has to do with development. Let's say it's the event development strategy or something. And so we know that's not happening next Tuesday in terms of being complete, but we set milestones for that strategy that says within a year we're going to be here, and our first event should be launched by here, whatever it may be, and that we get sort of everybody buys into it. Because one of the things we see sometimes out there is everybody gets so excited they want to do everything at once. That doesn't work, right? And so there's really a goal for how, and everybody looks at this and says, yeah, that sort of makes sense to us. And the resource side is there, whatever resource shifts. And then everybody goes, just like you said, we can check in and talk about progress, talk about ways that everybody in this room can help if there's barriers that have come up that we need to figure out how we can work around. So
because you need to have a column almost like when you're trying to pay off your credit cards. You take the smaller one and pay it off first so you feel good about yourself. You don't go after the one that you owe $3 million on. You ain't going to go nowhere with it.
Right.
But you take some of the smaller goals and work in that. And like you said, you can't go through all 10 of them and get 2% out of each 10 items that you have on there because you're going to get frustrated and it goes right back on the shelf.
Yeah, and some take a little bit longer, but everybody knows that. But there's still milestones. There's still progress. Right?
One of the things I wanted to mention is that I have heard for years now from not just the locals, but from our visitors as well, there's nothing for our kids to do.
Mm-hmm.
I hear it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when you've got listed on one of these, you've got outdoor recreation, hiking, biking, and water sports. And, we can do better in all of those avenues. And I think there are options for us to look into.
Yeah.
And we've got to have things to do because, everybody loves to go to the beach, but they don't want to stay there every single day.
Yep.
They've got to have options of different things to do. And so I think as a whole, from this end of the county to the middle of the county to the north end of the county, we've got to have things that they can enjoy.
Yeah. And
What you talked about is perfect for the north end.
and sort of,
Biking and all that stuff. I mean,
and I think not to get in the weeds there, but just for a second to get in the weeds. I think the opportunity there is to specifically say, here's areas we want to explore. And I'm going to just raise one that may make no sense. But let's say it's cycling.
Right.
Look, we want to explore cycling.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's milestones. It says we're going to do research in the cycling community. We're going to come back with, specific recommendations at this point. We're going to hope to institute a new program with maybe a concessionaire with bike rentals, whatever the deal is.
Mm-hmm.
Those are laid out, I think, Commissioner, what you're talking about, they're laid out. And then everybody can kind of track those as well as go, how do we help you? So if the concessionaire if the cycling concessionaire is having some big problem getting permits or whatever, everybody actually knows that and says, we'll help you. Like, we'll help that because we know that's an initiative that we're all trying to get done. So, yeah, that's what we wanted to just talk about and say that's what we want to work with everybody on.
Right.
Okay, then we had one other quick question.
Okay.
And I think we've probably done this, but just in case, is there anything essentially is there anything you say to yourselves, and you just raised one that, like the one Jennifer you raised was a big one, but is there anything that we haven't talked about essentially? Is there one thing that you say, you know what, I want to make sure beyond what we've talked about, that it is an outcome or it is included in the strategic planning process? I mean, I think we've had a great discussion today, so I
I
suspect.
do think
I
that,
think we have.
he may be planning to come up and speak, but I don't want to lose sight of Jim Bagby's, refresh the destination comment. I think that's
Okay.
very, very valid. and
That's a
I just
great
wanna
one.
make sure it doesn't get lost in
Yeah.
all the dialogue.
Yeah, and I think, again, trying to define that. So it's not one of these sort of generic recommendations about refresh, but what is refresh? So
What does it mean?
absolutely, I think that's a
Like
great
that,
one. That's a
something
great
like that.
example.
Yeah.
Anything else that you think, we talked about a lot, but you think maybe?
I think you covered the gamut.
Okay.
I think that was really, really a great group discussion and
Yeah.
a lot of.
No, really helpful to hear. This is the way to do it because we then want to go back and really study these things and come back and be able to talk specifically. And so really, we're on Scott and mine and Breeze's behalf, really want to thank everybody.
Thank you.
For the input
Thank you.
today. It was really helpful.
If you don't mind sticking around a few minutes, we'll let the public talk, and if they have anything
Yeah,
that maybe
absolutely.
you can come back up and
Yeah.
answer to.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, okay,
So,
thank
thanks,
you.
thanks,
Thank
thanks.
you very much.
Can I ask really-
Anyone want to speak? Linda, come on up. Oh,
Tiffany?
I was just gonna ask, what's the timeline? I'm so sorry, Linda. What's the timeline? So I know we have, and I don't have the paper in front of me, but I know we have our public workshops. Are we meeting then again in November with the recommendation? When are the next kind of points and then when we can bring something back to the commissioners?
November's the next steering committee meeting where we'll have sort of what you would call a draft, a high-level draft, deliverable in December.
Okay,
Great,
thank you.
thank you.
And our commitment as part of our RFP is once we deliver it, you can never talk to us again. We're done. It's yours. We have committed.
I get it.
We have committed to come back 3 months later and have a deep dive with the group. So we've committed as part of our proposal to be here 3 months after the deliverable to then say, okay, how does it fit? Where do we need to, what do we got to do? So we're committed well into the first quarter of next year.
This might be for the
Thank
chair,
you.
but when can we do this again?
But that would be up to everybody. I mean, we could do it a couple of months down the road. What do you think, Matt?
I was going to say, Matt, just for a jump in, I think that's a great question for the new chief administrative officer of the county.
No, I think, that's a very good point, and I think that, doing this more frequently would be beneficial, right? I think what we all understand, to the points that some of you all made, is this idea of, being meetings and workshops, but I think there's tremendous value in getting these two groups together. I think Amy said every 6 months. Sorry. Well, sorry, I was just.
And that's in December, right? Mm-hmm.
I was going to suggest quarterly.
I don't have a problem with that either.
It's a great idea.
I mean,
So in November, what date are we looking at? What date are they?
it's the first Tuesday of November is our
Is that when
is
you
our
have your
TDC
meet-
meeting. It's the
okay.
first Tuesday
Okay.
of November.
Okay.
So we always meet the first Tuesday of every month.
We just got to be cognizant of any conferences, because I think there's
Right.
a conference, a FAC conference in November. I'm pretty sure there is.
I don't,
Okay.
I don't remember.
I just want to say one thing from a semantic standpoint. Somebody said final. And we don't, the idea is to come back with, for lack of a better term, what would you call it, draft, because the idea is there's going to be another round of input here. Like we don't want to come back and say, okay, this is sort of it. Well, we want to come back and say, we've really studied everything we've talked about in others, and then kind of here's where we are. Here's the draft plan, if you will, because we.
And that's December? Is that what you said? When's that coming?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so I like Commissioner Glidewell's idea of having something in November prior to and in December.
Okay,
So that would
okay.
be great.
Yeah. So I mean, I just want to. Anyway, I think that we're going to walk in and then we're done. We we want that next piece of feedback from the draft plan.
Let's leave that up to Brian Kellenberger to just get everybody on the schedule.
Brian?
You're in charge of getting the TDC and the BCC workshop scheduled.
Agreed.
You know, thinking along the same lines to make our tourism our number one economic engine, you know, better. So
Absolutely.
we're going to do a little bit more permanent audio and video in here to make it better as well. I've got a few emails from people that couldn't quite hear us very well, but our AV people have assured me that we're going to make it so everybody can hear and be seen.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone, anything else before we have public comment?
Dan, real quickly.
Yeah.
One other thing, and I know this is probably on your radar already, but I'd love to see, we haven't talked anything about reserves and the reserve study.
Yep.
I'd love to, I'm
Great.
sure this is already on your radar, but I'd love to make sure that there's some alignment between
Yep.
the vision of, right, the strategic plan and, right,
Yep.
the future vision for
No,
the
absolutely.
reserves as well.
We've done some research on some other reserve policies and just kind of, yeah, so absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome,
Yeah.
thank you. Sounds
Yeah.
great, yeah, thank you.
Okay, Linda, come on up. Please state your name.
Linda Frakes. I live in Miramar Beach. Miramar Beach has kind of become the anomaly, I think, now. It used to be about coming down here to go to Miramar Beach. Now it's mostly 38-centric, I think. But I've owned down here since 2010, and I've been coming down here since the 80s. And I just want to say that, and let me also say that I run a women's group that has 600 members. So I talk to a lot of people all the time that are strictly Miramar Beach, Welton County based. And when you're looking at the one slide that was way back when, and I can't remember what it said anymore now, but the slide that said that there was some cognitive dissonance about people wanting development but being unhappy with development or whatever that discernment is, I'm baffled if you think that's only a communication problem. It's not just it partially is a communication problem, yes. And Commissioner Johns and I have talked about that because I live off of Driftwood, and boy, I can't wait for that to become one way. And I tell everybody I know because nobody knows that. So yes, there certainly is that. But being that I live off of Driftwood, I now am living across the street from a development that was approved to add thousands of cars on 98 every day. And it's going to be a disaster.
Are you talking about Echelon?
Is that what it's called? I don't even know.
Hasn't gone before the board yet.
No, I'm talking about the one in the old executive golf gardens.
Oh, the apartments.
Right, right. That is going to be a disaster because we now, for the first time in a while, have had the ability to come out on Driftwood and turn left. And I'm sure you all know that there's not that many roads that go from the beach road to the main road, and Driftwood is one of the main ones. And we now can turn left, taking your life in your hands a little bit to turn left there, but we're doing it.
You're going to have a light soon.
Really? When? See, why do we know that stuff?
Well, it'll be, because it's not tomorrow. It
Oh,
will
okay.
be within the next, it'll be within a year, within a year.
Within a year?
Right
Wow.
after we re-nourish.
No, this is already in the works.
Okay.
Mine was proposed before I took office 7 years ago.
Wow.
It's
We've had the
close.
money for 7 years and still haven't.
Well, that apartment complex, the county had the opportunity to buy all the golf carts.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
In their infinite wisdom, no.
Danny wanted to buy it.
Now we have the back half, we have a park for, I don't know who goes there, but
A lot of people.
who goes to parks, and they're usually alone in the park. And,
I was there yesterday.
apartment building was gonna get a free backyard back there. It's a shame, it was a tragedy that we didn't, the county didn't get all of that.
Well, and I think my point about that is,
I tried.
My point about that is, as a local, again, I've lived here for a long time. I have never seen as many longer than me residents move out of this county and go somewhere else. People that, it breaks my heart, people I've known for years that have lived here since they were kids, and they can't take it anymore. Most of them live on the other side of 98. I'm fortunate that I live close to the beach, but the lack of consideration for the locals with that kind of a build-out project on a road that's already completely ridiculously overcrowded, even off-season, but certainly in season. Locals don't feel like anybody is paying any attention to what's being said, and so that's why. Yes, do we think, to his point, do we think we're lucky to live here? I thank God every day I can live here. I think most of us are very fortunate to live here, but we feel as locals that most of the dialogue and the considerations don't have us in mind primarily. And maybe some of that is as it should be, but if you're asking why 50% of the people that are locals filled that survey out, that's why. And part of it is communication, more than I knew apparently, but it's consideration of what is it like to live here and work here year-round every day. And I think it's, I feel very strongly that you need to hear that, because I'm not the only one with that opinion. I speak for a bunch of people who feel that way. So, thanks for the time.
I think a lot of us wanted the golf garden to be county-owned, the whole 25, 35 acres, and we were extremely disappointed when that didn't happen. But
well, I can tell you that accidents are waiting to happen, because we have a left-hand turn lane. People are already trying to come out. There's nobody living there now, but they're trying to come out and turn into our left turn lane to go east. So it's just a matter of time before somebody gets killed at that intersection. So it's frustrating.
thank you. Thank you. Anyone?
And I hate to say it, but until SB 180 gets looked at a little bit, get ready for more. I mean, we can't do any, we already got one hand tied behind our back.
What's SB
Thanks to
180?
the state representative.
It's a Senate bill that basically the whole purpose of the bill initially was to speed the process if your home was damaged in a storm, so that you didn't have to take forever to get a permit and things like that.
Oh, I see.
However, before it got signed, there were a lot of other things that were added to it, and it has kind of handed, pardon me?
At the last minute.
At the last minute, yes.
Great.
And so it kind of tied our hands, and we can't even collect mobility fees now. And,
Or impact fees.
and we can't do anything to make anything more stringent than it already is at this point. We're
Wow.
hoping that they're going to loosen up that bill soon, but time will tell. But
Well, and let me just say, you're talking my language with the renourishment. Normally, I'm here talking about the beach, so I wasn't going to do that today. I'm glad you guys all did it on my behalf, because we got to figure that out. You can talk all you want about off-season and biking in the woods, but people come here because we have the most beautiful beaches, and they're going to continue to squeeze onto the beach however they can until they're sick of it, and then they just won't come anymore. So they've already squeezed locals out in many cases, so.
thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? Public comment? Anyone else? No? Seeing none? Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
I spoke to y'all, I did.